I stood in front of the floor-length mirror, adjusting the emerald silk dress that had cost more than my first car. Tonight was Richard's big night, his promotion to Chief Financial Officer at Morrison & Blake, one of Boston's most prestigious investment firms. The party would be at the Four Seasons, where the city's financial elite would gather to celebrate my husband's ascension to the C-suite. Richard appeared behind me, impeccable in his custom-made Tom Ford suit. "Perfect," he said, his hands settling on my shoulders. "You'll be the most beautiful woman there." His reflection smiled at me, that confident smile that had first caught my attention 12 years ago at a charity gala. Back then, he'd been a rising star in investment banking, and I'd been building my tech startup from the ground up. "The car's here," he announced, checking his Patek Philippe watch, last year's anniversary gift. "Ready to make our grand entrance?" Nodded, grabbing my clutch and making one final adjustment to my updo. The diamond earrings he'd given me this morning caught the light, sparkling like stars. "A promotion gift," he'd said, though we both knew I could have bought them myself. My company, Innovatech Solutions, had just closed another successful quarter. But tonight wasn't about me. Tonight was Richard's moment. The Four Seasons ballroom was already crowded when we arrived. The who's who of Boston's financial sector milled about, champagne flutes in hand, air kisses and firm handshakes exchanged like currency. I recognized most of them: clients, competitors, potential investors. In this world, everyone was connected, and every interaction could lead to the next big deal. "Richard!" William Morrison himself approached, his wife Patricia trailing behind. As the founding partner of Morrison & Blake, William had been grooming Richard for the CFO position for years. The man of the hour. "William, Patricia." Richard greeted them warmly, his arm tightening around my waist. "You remember my wife, Alexandra?" "Of course." William smiled, though his eyes barely flickered over me. "The trophy wife with the little tech company." I felt Richard's chest shake with laughter, and something cold settled in my stomach. "Well, someone has to look good on my arm at these events," he joked, and the men shared a knowing chuckle. Trophy wife. The words echoed in my head as I maintained my smile, years of business negotiations helping me keep my composure. Little tech company? Innovatech had revolutionized supply chain management software. Our client list included Fortune 500 companies, and our last valuation had put us at over $500 million. But here, in this room full of old money and older attitudes, I was just Richard's beautiful wife, an accessory to his success. The evening continued, a blur of introductions and conversations where I was spoken about, but rarely to. Richard worked the room masterfully, his charm turned up to full wattage. I watched him hold court, remembering how that same charm had once been directed at me, how he'd seemed so impressed by my ambition, my vision for Innovatech. And of course, none of this would be possible without my gorgeous wife. Richard's voice carried across the room as he began his acceptance speech. "She's the perfect partner for a man in my position, beautiful, graceful, and always ready to host the perfect dinner party." The crowd chuckled appreciatively, and I took another sip of champagne, letting the bubbles burn away the words I wanted to say. I thought about the acquisition deal I'd closed last week, the new AI algorithm my team had developed, the expansion plans waiting on my desk at home. "To the future of Morrison & Blake," Richard raised his glass, "and to my lovely trophy wife who makes success look so good." More laughter, more knowing looks. I smiled and raised my glass, but inside, something shifted. The diamond earrings felt heavy, the emerald dress constraining. For 12 years I'd played this role, diminishing my own success to shine the spotlight on Richard. I'd thought we were partners, equals sharing in each other's triumphs. Now I saw what he really thought of me, what he'd always thought of me. As the applause died down and Richard returned to working the room, I slipped away to the powder room. In the elegant marble bathroom, I stared at my reflection, seeing myself through their eyes, the beautiful, accomplished wife, the perfect accessory to a successful man. But that wasn't who I was. I was Alexandra Chen, CEO of Innovatech Solutions, a woman who had built something from nothing, who had revolutionized an industry. And it was time everyone, especially my husband, remembered that. I pulled out my phone and dialed my assistant's number. Sarah, I need you to set up an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning and contact our lawyers. It's time to move forward with Project Phoenix. The plan I'd been considering for months, the acquisition that would shake up the financial technology sector, it was time to put it into action. Richard thought I was just a trophy wife. He was about to learn that trophies could have very sharp edges. As I returned to the party, I watched Richard holding court near the bar, basking in his moment of triumph. He had no idea that this promotion party wasn't just his big night. It was the beginning of my own carefully orchestrated endgame. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my home office as I reviewed the documents one final time. I'd been up since dawn, the events of last night's party playing on repeat in my mind. Richard had slept in, no doubt, nursing a champagne headache from his celebration. All board members are confirmed for the 9 a.m. meeting. Sarah's voice came through the intercom. The lawyers are already in the conference room at Innovatech headquarters. Perfect. I closed the folder containing Project Phoenix's details. 6 months of careful planning, of quiet negotiations and strategic moves, all leading to this moment. Has Richard left for work yet? His driver just pulled up to the house. I stood, smoothing down my Chanel suit, navy blue, severe, nothing. Like the emerald party dress from last night. Through the window, I watched Richard emerge from our Beacon Hill townhouse, straightening his tie as he walked to the waiting car. CFO of Morrison & Blake. I wondered how long he'd get to enjoy that title. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen. No relation, though Richard had always found it amusing that I shared a last name with one of Boston's most powerful venture capitalists. Everything's in place. Board's ready to vote. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the garage where my own driver waited. The morning traffic parted before us as we made our way to Innovatech's headquarters in the Seaport District. The gleaming glass tower reflected the morning sun, our company logo a beacon of innovation and success. My success, though, Richard had always treated it as a cute hobby, something to keep his trophy wife occupied. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 12 faces turned toward me, a mix of venture capitalists, tech veterans, and industry experts. These were people who knew my worth, who had backed my vision from the beginning. Good morning. I took my place at the head of the table. I appreciate you all coming on such short notice. As you know, Project Phoenix has been in development for several months. Recent events have convinced me that now is the time to move forward. Marcus Chen nodded from his seat to my right. He'd been one of my earliest investors, believing in Innovatech when it was just an idea in a Harvard Business School dorm room. The numbers look solid, Alexandra. The market's ripe for disruption. I opened the presentation, and the room's screens lit up with our analysis. Morrison & Blake has been the dominant force in traditional investment banking for decades, but they've fallen behind in financial technology. Their infrastructure is outdated, their digital presence weak. Their clients are starting to notice. Charts and graphs appeared, showing Morrison & Blake's declining market share in digital services. Their new CFO, I continued, letting a small smile play across my lips, is more focused on maintaining their old business model than innovating for the future. And you're sure about the timing? Janet Wong, our head of legal, asked. This is an aggressive move, I'm sure. I brought up the next slide. Innovatech's valuation is at an all-time high. Our new blockchain-based trading platform is ready for launch. More importantly, we've already secured support from key Morrison & Blake clients who are eager for change. The presentation continued as I laid out the details of our hostile takeover bid. Innovatech would acquire Morrison & Blake's digital division, effectively gutting their ability to compete in the modern financial landscape. It was bold, aggressive, and exactly what our shareholders had been waiting for. "There's one more thing," I added as the presentation concluded. "As you know, my husband Richard Walker was just promoted to CFO of Morrison & Blake." The room stirred with understanding. "I'll be recusing myself from any direct negotiations to avoid conflict of interest. Marcus will lead the acquisition team." "And Richard?" Marcus asked quietly. "He has no idea?" "No." I thought back to last night, to his casual dismissal of everything I'd built. "He still thinks Innovatech is my little tech company." The board's vote was unanimous. Project Phoenix was approved and the wheels were set in motion. As the room cleared out, Marcus lingered behind. "I've known you since Harvard, Alexandra. Are you sure you want to do this? It's not just business. This is personal." I looked out the window at the Boston skyline, at the financial district where Morrison & Blake's offices dominated the view. "Last night, my husband called me his trophy wife in front of everyone who matters in Boston's financial world. He's about to learn that this trophy has been planning a corporate takeover while he was busy underestimating her." My phone buzzed. A message from Richard. "Dinner tonight? Celebrating the new position properly." I typed a quick reply. "Wouldn't miss it." By the time I got home that evening, the first phase of Project Phoenix would be complete. The takeover bid would be public, and Richard's perfect promotion would be overshadowed by the biggest threat Morrison & Blake had ever faced. Sometimes, the most dangerous weapon in business is being underestimated. Richard had spent years seeing what he wanted to see: a beautiful wife, a perfect accessory to his success. He was about to discover just how wrong he'd been. After hanging up, I prepare for my confrontation with James, reviewing the evidence Patricia provided. The emails reveal not just disloyalty, but a fundamental misunderstanding of where publishing is headed. James is clinging to an outdated model that serves an increasingly limited audience. When he enters my office later, his expression is a mixture of defiance and poorly concealed anxiety. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes, James. Please, have a seat." I gesture to the chair across from my desk. "I'd like to discuss your communications with our authors." His face pales slightly. "I've been reassuring them about our commitment to quality during this transition. Have you?" I open the folder containing his emails. That's not what these suggest. For the first time, I see fear flash across James Winters' face, the fear of a man who suddenly realizes he's not as clever as he thought. Parties I hosted for your colleagues, those charity galas where I played the perfect wife? I was doing market research, making connections, understanding exactly where Morrison & Blake was vulnerable. "You used me," he whispered, the irony apparently lost on him. "No, Richard. You used me. You used my success, my connections, my intelligence, all while dismissing me as arm candy. Did you really think I didn't notice how you took credit for my business insights during board meetings? How you leveraged my tech industry contacts for your own advancement? My phone buzzed. Marcus Chen updating me on the market's reaction to our announcement. Morrison and Blake's stock was already dropping while Innovatech soared. William Morrison called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning, Richard said, his voice hollow. As CFO, I'm supposed to present our defense strategy. Good luck. With that, I handed him the folder. Here's a copy of our complete takeover proposal. You'll find that we've already secured support from your major shareholders. They're not happy with Morrison and Blake's reluctance to embrace digital transformation. He flipped through the pages, his financial acumen allowing him to grasp the full scope of what we'd planned. This is brilliant. You'll strip away our entire digital infrastructure, force us to either modernize through Innovatech or become obsolete. And the best part? I smiled, remembering all the times he'd patronizingly explained basic business concepts to me at parties. As CFO, you'll have to be the one to implement whatever decision the board makes. Either way, you'll end up working for my company. Richard looked up at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time in our marriage. How long have you been planning this? Project Phoenix has been in development for 6 months, but the seeds were planted years ago, every time you introduced me as my wife, Alexandra, instead of Alexandra Chen, CEO of Innovatech. Every time, you dismissed my success as luck or timing rather than strategy and skill. My phone buzzed again, Sarah confirming my schedule for tomorrow. Interviews with CNBC, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal. The business world wanted to hear from the woman who dared to take on Morrison and Blake. What happens now? Richard asked, sounding lost. Now? Now you go to your emergency board meeting and explain how your wife's little tech company is about to swallow Morrison and Blake's future. And then you come home and we discuss the terms of both our professional and personal relationships going forward. I picked up my wine glass again, savoring both the vintage and the moment. Oh, and Richard, you might want to update your resume. Once this takeover is complete, Morrison and Blake will need a CFO who actually understands digital finance. He stood shakily, the folder clutched in his hands like a lifeline. As he headed for the stairs, presumably to his home office to prepare for tomorrow's meeting, he paused. I never meant to underestimate you. That was your first mistake, replied. Trophy wives are meant to be underestimated. CEOs aren't. I can get one, Caroline offers. But what will you do? What any good strategist does, I reply. Anticipate and counteract. After we hang up, I outline a plan. If Richard wants industry warfare, I'll need to demonstrate precisely why his approach is outdated. Fortunately, I've been preparing for this battle since the day I decided to acquire Harman. What are you thinking? Andrew asks, recognizing my strategic expression. I'm thinking it's time to release our first major announcement. I tell him, a bit earlier than planned, but the timing now seems perfect. The new imprint? I nod. Along with our first I lift my glass. To abrupt endings and new beginnings. And to housewives who aren't what they seem, Andrew adds, clinking his glass against mine. The following morning, I arrive at the office to find a different energy permeating the building. Staff members greet me with new enthusiasm, executive assistants offer congratulations, and even the security guard mentions seeing the company in the news. Patricia meets me at the elevator. You'll want to see this right away, she says, handing me a tablet open to Publishers Weekly. The headline reads, Harman's new direction signals industry shift as 5 authors request rights reversions from traditional publishers. Rights reversions? I ask, scanning the article. Authors wanting their rights back from other publishers to pursue deals with more progressive houses, she explains. We've already received queries from 3 agents representing major authors interested in our new imprint. The strategy is working even better than anticipated. By focusing on what Harman could become rather than dismantling what it was, I've changed the narrative from hostile takeover to visionary leadership. My office phone rings. the first of many calls that day from industry figures suddenly interested in Harman's evolution. The invisible housewife has become the most visible executive in publishing, and Richard's gathering of old guard allies has inadvertently amplified my message of change. The revolution isn't just beginning. It's winning. I smiled, the same practiced smile I'd worn at countless corporate events. It's simple business logic. Morrison & Blake has fallen behind in digital innovation. Our technology can help them bridge that gap. Some might say the timing is interesting, given that your husband, Richard Walker, was just promoted to CFO of Morrison & Blake. Business opportunities don't wait for convenient timing, I replied smoothly. Our board saw a chance to create value for our shareholders. That's what matters. Between interviews, Sarah brought more updates. William Morrison had called an emergency board meeting. Major clients were demanding answers, and Richard had tried calling 6 more times. He's on his way here, she warned. Security is on alert. I nodded, already preparing for my next interview. Bloomberg this time, focusing on the technical aspects of the takeover bid. I laid out our vision for modernizing Morrison & Blake's operations, watching the ticker as our stock climbed higher. Mrs. Walker? The Bloomberg reporter began. Ms. Chen, I corrected firmly. I use my own name professionally. The morning blurred into a series of interviews, each one adding fuel to the fire that was consuming Boston's financial district. By noon, a trophy wife takeover was trending on Twitter. The story was too perfect. The underestimated wife turning the tables on her husband's traditional firm. Richard finally burst into my office between segments. His tie was askew, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "This is insane." I looked up calmly from my preparation notes. Is it? Or is it exactly what you should have expected if you'd ever taken my business seriously? The board meeting was chaos, he continued, pacing. William is apoplectic. You have to stop this. Actually, I smiled, I don't. Check your company's stock price, Richard. Then check mine. The market's already decided. Who's winning this fight? Sarah appeared in the doorway. Wall Street Journal is ready for you. We're not done here, Richard protested. Yes, we are. I stood, straightening my jacket. You had years to see me as an equal. Now you get to see me as your competition. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of media appearances and market reactions. By closing bell, Morrison & Blake's stock had fallen 20%, while Innovatex had soared. The old guard was crumbling, and everyone knew it. One more thing, I told Sarah before heading home. Send flowers to William Morrison's office. White lilies, appropriate for mourning the death of old ways of doing business. As I left the office that evening, the city lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere in those gleaming towers, the men who had dismissed me as just another trophy wife were realizing their mistake. They'd spent so long seeing what they expected to see that they'd missed what I was building right under their noses. My phone buzzed one final time, a message from Marcus. Board meeting tomorrow at 9. The sharks smell blood. I smiled, thinking of all the corporate wives out there watching this story unfold. How many of them were hiding similar ambitions behind perfect smiles? How many were waiting for their own moment to shatter expectations? The trophy wife revolution had begun. And this was just day one. I meet with our marketing team to review plans for the NPA conference. Beyond my keynote, we're launching a comprehensive rebrand of Harman, new visual identity, messaging platform, and corporate positioning. We need to visually signal the transformation that's occurring, I explain, reviewing their concepts. Respect for legacy while embracing evolution. The team has captured this balance beautifully, refreshing Harman's historic logo while introducing contemporary elements that suggest forward momentum. This is precisely right, I tell them, approving the final designs. The industry needs to see that change doesn't mean abandoning quality. it means redefining it for today's readers. As I leave the office that evening, Caroline calls with unexpected news. Richard has decided to launch his own publishing venture, she says without preamble. He's calling it Heritage Press, dedicated to traditional publishing values and literary excellence without agenda. I absorb this information, immediately recognizing both the threat and the opportunity it represents. With Meridian's backing? I ask. And several other investors from his circle, she confirms. He's positioning it as the antithesis of Harmon's new direction. Good, I say, surprising her. Good? Eleanor, he's directly challenging everything. You're doing? Exactly. And in doing so, he's clarifying the choice for the industry, evolution or extinction. In fact, Richard was as surprised as you were by Innovatech's moves, though he really shouldn't have been, if he'd been paying attention to his wife's business instead of just using her as arm candy. The room fell silent. These men weren't used to being interrupted, especially not by a woman they'd previously seen as just another executive's decorative spouse. Let's discuss the real issue, I continued, distributing copies of my presentation. Morrison & Blake's digital infrastructure is outdated. Your clients are demanding modern solutions that you can't provide. Innovatech's offer isn't just generous, it's your best chance at survival. We are one of the oldest investment banks in Boston, William began, but I was ready. And you're losing market share every quarter. Here's data from your own reports. I pulled up graphs on the room's screens. Digital trading platforms are eating into your traditional business. Mobile banking is replacing personal brokers. Your attempts at in-house digital solutions have failed repeatedly. Richard shifted, uncomfortably. These were his reports, his data, probably intended for his first major presentation as CFO. I'd found them on his home office computer months ago. He never had changed his password from our anniversary date. Innovatech's technology could modernize. Your entire operation, I continued. Our blockchain trading platform alone would put you years ahead of your competitors. Or you can refuse and watch your clients migrate to firms that better serve their needs. This is blackmail, William sputtered. This is business, I corrected. Something you all seem to forget I understand quite well, despite my apparent qualification as just a trophy wife. The room erupted in argument. Board members shouted over each other, some defending tradition, others arguing for modernization. Through it all, Richard sat silent, watching me with a mixture of horror and reluctant admiration. Enough, William slammed his hand on the table. We will not be strong-armed by what? I stood, commanding the room's attention. By a woman? By someone you underestimated? Let me be clear, this takeover will happen. The only question is whether Morrison & Blake will emerge stronger for it or become another cautionary tale about rigid institutions that failed to adapt. I gathered my materials, preparing to leave them to their deliberations. Oh, and one more thing. I turned back at the door. Given Innovatech's shareholding position and the clear conflict of interest, I believe it's appropriate for Richard to recuse himself from any votes regarding this matter. Richard's face went pale. I'd just effectively stripped him of his power. In his first week as CFO. You have 48 hours to accept our initial offer, I concluded. After that, we'll take our proposal directly to your shareholders. I suspect they'll be very interested in why their stock price has dropped 20% in 2 days. As I left the boardroom, I heard the arguments resume behind me. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Second phase ready, hostile tender, offer prepared if needed. I smiled, remembering all the times I'd sat quietly at Morrison & Blake functions, watching these men congratulate themselves on their business acumen while treating me like decoration. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one you don't see as a threat. After your acquisition of Harmon, Richard's reaction made some things very clear about our relationship. her expression is resolute rather than distressed. I've been considering returning to publishing myself. I was an editor before becoming Richard's wife, I finish for her. I remember your work at Ashcroft Literary. You discovered several significant authors. She looks genuinely touched that I know this detail. Yes, before I set it aside to manage Richard's social calendar. Pproach continues over the following weeks. 3 more acquisition offers arrive from different companies, each slightly higher than the last. Industry rumors suggest he's assembling a consortium of traditional publishers to rescue Harman from its new direction. Rather than dignifying these maneuvers with responses, I accelerate our transformation. We announce an international expansion, digital subscription service, and film-television production partnership, all initiatives that had been planned for next year but are strategically revealed early. The market responds enthusiastically, with our public valuation increasing substantially. By the time Richard's consortium makes its final offer of $34 million, industry analysts are estimating Harman's actual value at nearly $50 million. They're not even in the ballpark anymore, Patricia observes as we review the latest offer. Our digital initiatives alone have created more value than they're acknowledging. They're valuing what Harman was, not what it's becoming, I reply. An increasingly expensive miscalculation. The rejection letter I send is polite, but pointed. While we appreciate your continued interest, Harman Publishing Group is focused on building long-term value through innovation rather than short-term transactions. We look forward to continuing our productive competition in the marketplace. That evening, my phone rings with an unfamiliar number. Eleanor Sullivan, I answer. Why won't you sell? Richard's voice, slightly slurred, suggests he's been drinking. Name your price. Everyone has one. This direct approach is unexpected after months of proxies and intermediaries. Hello, Richard. I'm well. Thank you for asking. Don't patronize. Me? He snaps. You've made your point. You've shown everyone how clever you are. Now take the money and go back to planning dinner parties. The comment is so absurdly outdated that I almost laugh. Richard, I didn't buy Harman to prove something to you. I bought it because I saw untapped potential that your approach was ignoring. You bought it for revenge, he insists, because we rejected your little novel. That was the catalyst, not the purpose, I correct him. Though I should thank you for that rejection. It opened my eyes to broader systemic issues in publishing. There's a long pause before he responds. What will it take, Eleanor? What do you want? I already have what I want, Richard. I'm building the company I always knew Harman could be. After we hang up, I reflect on how completely our roles have reversed. Once, I was invisible to him, the silent wife at the dinner table. Now, he's the one seeking my attention and validation. The transformation is complete, but not in the way either of us might have anticipated. I'm having my things moved to the apartment above Innovatech's offices. I think we both need space to reconsider our personal and professional relationships. Alexandra? He called after me, but I was already walking away. In our bedroom, I began packing methodically. Designer dresses he'd bought to show me off at parties. Jewelry given to mark his achievements rather than mine. All the trappings of a trophy wife's life. My phone buzzed. Marcus updating me on tomorrow's strategy. The hostile tender offer was ready if Morrison and Blake's board rejected our initial proposal. We'd go directly to shareholders, many of whom were already calling for modernization. Another message flashed across my screen, this one from William Morrison's wife, Patricia. How dare you betray us like this after we welcomed you into our circle? I smiled, remembering all the condescending tea parties and charity luncheons where Patricia and her friends had treated me like a pretty decoration. Check your investment portfolio, I typed back. Innovatech's stock has doubled since announcing the takeover. You're welcome. As I zipped up my suitcase, Richard appeared in the doorway. You don't have to leave. Yes, I do. I turn to face him. Tomorrow, Morrison and Blake's board will vote on our proposal. If they accept, you'll effectively be working for me. If they reject it, we'll go hostile and you'll probably lose your job when shareholders demand change. Either way, our relationship will never be the same. Because of one stupid comment at a party? He tried one last time. Because you meant that comment, Richard. In your mind, I was always the trophy wife first and CEO second. Now you'll have to decide if you can handle having a wife who's more successful than you are. I called for my driver and watched from the window as my bags were loaded into the car. The townhouse had never really felt like my home. It was just another stage set for playing the role Richard wanted me to play. As I prepared to leave, I turned back one last time. You know what the irony is? If you had really seen me, really valued what I built, we could have been an incredible power couple. Instead, you wanted a trophy wife, and now that trophy is taking over your company. James shifts uncomfortably. We're refining our launch strategy, ensuring everything aligns with our vision of literary excellence. Of course. Quality takes time, I offer diplomatically, though we all know their delays reflect market uncertainty, rather than perfectionism. Richard appears ready to make a cutting remark when the lights dim for the ceremony to begin. We continue to our table, where Caroline and the Prism team await. When he arrives, the transformation is visible. Gone is the arrogant executive who dismissed my manuscript years ago. In his place sits a humbled man whose certainties have been shaken. Thank you for seeing me, Eleanor, he begins, using my first name rather than the dismissive Mrs. Sullivan he'd previously favored. I appreciate the opportunity. Of course, I reply neutrally. What can I do for you, James? He meets my gaze directly. I've been wrong. About a lot of things, but especially about the direction of publishing and the value of diverse voices. The admission seems genuinely difficult for him, a man whose career has been built on unwavering confidence in his literary judgment. What changed your perspective? I ask, though Marion has already revealed the catalyst. Several things, he acknowledges. The market results speak volumes. Your success here at Harmon versus Heritage's struggles. He pauses. And personally, discovering quality work I would have previously dismissed based on preconceptions. Marion's novel, I suggest, seeing no reason to pretend ignorance. He looks surprised, then nods. She mentioned speaking with you. Yes, her manuscript forced me to confront my own biases. The quality was undeniable, yet I would have rejected it without reading if it had crossed my desk from an unknown female author. The self-awareness is remarkably candid. That's a significant realization. It's been humbling, he admits. I've had to reconsider many of my professional judgments over the years. Into Global Tech's cryptocurrency trading practices? It's ready. We were planning to announce next week, but move it up, I said. Today would be perfect. Within an hour, the financial world was rocked by two major announcements. Morrison and Blake's attempted alliance with Global Tech and the SEC's formal investigation into Global Tech's potentially illegal trading practices. Their stock prices plummeted in tandem. My phone buzzed again. Richard, what did you do? I didn't do anything, I replied truthfully. The SEC operates independently, though if you'd ever bothered to actually talk business with me at all those industry events, you might have known about the investigation. The morning devolved into a flurry of activity. Our board unanimously approved increasing our tender offer for Morrison and Blake's digital division. Global Tech's CEO was forced to step down pending the SEC investigation, and William Morrison was discovering that his attempted counter-move had only weakened his position. Around noon, I received an unexpected visitor. Patricia Morrison herself stepped out of the elevator into my office, looking less polished than usual. How could you? She demanded. William was always good to you. I gestured for her to sit, maintaining my professional composure. Good to me? You mean he tolerated me at social functions while dismissing my company's achievements? He gave Richard opportunities. And that's exactly the problem, I cut her off. Everything was about Richard, about the men in your world. Did you ever once ask me about Innovatech? About what I was building? Patricia fell silent, and I saw the realization dawn in her eyes. All those charity committee meetings, all those social gatherings, she'd never once treated me as anything but Richard's decorative wife. It's not personal, I continued, softer now. It's business. Morrison and Blake needs to evolve or it will die. I'm offering a path forward. By humiliating our husbands? By showing them that the women they underestimated are capable of more than just looking pretty at parties. My phone buzzed with urgent news. Global Tech was withdrawing from the partnership. Deal, their CEO's resignation throwing their company into chaos. Morrison and Blake's stock dropped another 15%. You should call your broker, I advised Patricia. Innovatech's stock is still rising. You might want to restructure your portfolio. After she left, I took a moment to appreciate the view. From my office, the same financial district where I'd played the trophy wife for so long, now witnessing my emergence as a force to be reckoned with. Sarah appeared with more updates. Morrison and Blake's board has called another emergency meeting. Richard's been asked to explain his connection to Global Tech's CEO. Perfect, I smiled. Send flowers to William Morrison's office, white lilies, appropriate for mourning the death of old ways of doing business. Richard's attempted counter-move had backfired spectacularly, weakening Morrison and Blake's position even further. He'd played the game the old way, through boys' club connections and backroom deals. I'd built my strategy on actual business fundamentals and regulatory compliance. The trophy wife hadn't just come to life. She'd learned to play the game. C extends beyond Harman, suggesting that our transformation is influencing the broader industry in ways I'd hoped but couldn't guarantee. Individual publishers are reassessing their acquisition patterns, marketing approaches, and leadership structures with new awareness of previous limitations. 1 month after James begins his consulting role, I receive an unexpected email from Marcus Reed at the National Publishers Association, confirming my election to the executive committee, the first female CEO to hold the position in over a decade. The vote was nearly unanimous, he writes. Your leadership at Harman has demonstrated that inclusive approaches can drive both cultural and commercial success. As I share this news with Andrew that evening, he observes, from invisible housewife to industry leader in under 2 years. That's quite the transformation. The transformation was always there, I correct him gently. It just needed the right catalyst to become visible. My phone buzzes with a text from Caroline. Just heard from a reliable source. Richard has left the country, apparently taking an extended sabbatical in France. I absorbed this final confirmation of Richard's retreat from the battlefield he never understood. While he saw our conflict as personal, a battle between individuals, it was always about something larger. The necessary evolution of an industry, the recognition of excluded voices, the expansion of whose stories deserve telling. Any regrets? Andrew asks, noting my thoughtful expression. Not about the changes we've made, I reply honestly. Though I do regret that some had to experience painful reckonings to recognize necessary evolution. Including Richard? I consider this carefully. Especially Richard. He defined himself by an approach that was already failing before I entered the picture. I just accelerated the inevitable. The housewife he dismissed at dinner has transformed an industry while he retreats to lick his wounds abroad. A poetic conclusion, perhaps, but not the one that brings me the most satisfaction. That comes the following week, when I hold the advance copy of my novel, finally published under my own name with the quality and respect it deserves. The dedication reads, simply, for every voice that persisted until heard. Even the butler paused in his serving duties. "He was proud of you," Eleanor offered weakly. "No, he was proud of how I looked on his arm. There's a difference." I turned to Richard. "When was the last time you actually asked me about Innovatech's innovations? About our blockchain platform or our AI trading algorithms?" Richard's silence was damning. I thought so. I dabbed my lips with the linen napkin. "You know what's ironic? If any of you had bothered to really see me as a business leader instead of just Richard's wife, you might have noticed the signs, the strategic acquisitions, the quiet accumulation of Morrison and Blake stock, the partnerships we were building with your key clients. It's not too late." Eleanor tried one last time. "You could call off this takeover. We're family." "That's exactly why I can't stop." I stood, placing my napkin beside my barely touched soup. "Because this isn't just about business anymore. It's about every woman who's been patted on the head and told her achievements are cute. It's about every wife who's been treated like decoration while her husband takes credit for her insights." "You'll destroy Richard's career," Robert protested. "No," I corrected. "Richard's outdated attitudes and inability to see me as an equal will damage his career. I'm offering Morrison and Blake a chance to survive in the digital age. Whether he survives with it depends entirely on his ability to adapt." I moved to leave, then turned back. "Oh, and Eleanor, you might want to diversify your investment portfolio. Morrison and Blake's stock hasn't hit bottom yet." The butler held my coat with trembling hands. As I walked to my waiting car, I heard raised voices from the dining room, the Walker family confronting the reality that their trophy daughter-in-law had outmaneuvered their golden son. "How was dinner?" Sarah asked as we pulled away. "Educational," I replied, checking the messages that had accumulated during the meal. "For them, at least. Has Marcus sent the updated tender offer?" "Just waiting for your final approval." I looked back at the Walker mansion, remembering all the formal dinners where I'd played my role perfectly while absorbing every detail of their world. "Send it. It's time to show them exactly what Richard's trophy wife can do." The car merged onto the highway, leaving behind the old money estates of Brookline for the gleaming towers of downtown Boston. Tomorrow, Morrison and Blake's board would face their moment of truth, adapt or die. And Richard would finally have to decide if he could handle being married to a woman who refused to be just a trophy anymore. Including Richard, he acknowledges. He still doesn't understand what happened, how completely the industry has evolved while he wasn't looking. After Thomas leaves, Andrew helps me gather dishes from the dining room. "Quite different from that dinner with Richard and Caroline a year ago," he observes. "In every conceivable way," I agree. "Though without that evening, none of this would have happened." "Do you think Richard ever realizes that his dismissal of you catalyzed all of this?" I consider the question. "I doubt it. That would require recognizing his own role in his downfall, seeing himself as I saw him that night." "The housewife he never actually saw," Andrew notes. "Exactly. The woman at the table whose thoughts, ambitions, and capabilities were invisible to him because they didn't fit his preconceptions. I load the dishwasher with practiced efficiency. His inability to see beyond those limitations cost him his company, his reputation, and ultimately his relevance. While you've achieved everything he lost," Andrew observes, "and more importantly, created opportunities for others previously overlooked. The observation captures what matters most about our transformation of Harman. Not my personal vindication, but the systemic changes that benefit countless authors, employees, and ultimately readers who now have access to more diverse, representative stories." The following morning brings news that solidifies this broader impact. The New York Times has published a feature on publishing's evolution, highlighting Harman as the industry's leading example of successful transformation. The article specifically notes our balanced approach, maintaining quality standards while expanding whose work meets those standards. Publishing's future may well be defined by who follows Harman's model versus who clings to outdated approaches, the piece concludes. The marketplace is already rendering its verdict on which path leads to sustainability. As I prepare for another day leading the company Richard built and I transformed, I reflect on the journey from invisible to influential. The housewife he dismissed has not only purchased his business, but reinvented it so thoroughly that it has become the industry standard against which others are measured. Yet the greatest satisfaction comes not from his loss, but from what we've built. A publishing house that recognizes value in voices previously silenced, that transforms potential into opportunity, that proves excellence and inclusivity are complementary rather than contradictory. The invisible woman at the dinner table has not only become visible, she has changed what everyone else sees. I stated firmly, "We acquire your digital division, implement our modernization plan, and retain control of all technology decisions. You keep your name on the door and your traditional banking operations, but the future of the firm runs through Innovatech. The board will never accept—" "Check your phone." He did, and I watched his face fall as he read the breaking news. 3 of Morrison & Blake's largest institutional investors had just publicly backed Innovatech's tender offer. "How? I've spent years being underestimated at your cocktail parties," I smiled. "Amazing what people will reveal to a woman they see as merely decorative." My phone buzzed. Sarah updating me on the market's reaction to the investor news. Morrison & Blake's stock was falling again while Innovatech's rose. "You have 1 hour," I told William, standing to leave. "After that, we go directly to shareholders with a hostile tender offer. Given your stock price and the public support we've already secured, I think we both know how that vote will go." "And Richard?" William asked. "What happens to him?" "That depends on him." I built Innovatech to break through old barriers, to prove that technology and talent matter more than gender or connections. If Richard can adapt to that world, there might be a place for him. If not? I shrugged. Well, he wanted a trophy. "Wife, sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for." I left William sitting there, staring into his coffee cup as his world transformed around him. By the time I reached Innovatech's offices, Sarah had more updates. Morrison & Blake's board has called an emergency session. Richard's resignation. Letter is circulating on social media. And Mrs. Walker, Eleanor, just called. She wants to move her personal investment portfolio to our management. I smiled, remembering last night's family dinner. Accept her account and send Richard's mother a welcome package. She should know that her daughter-in-law's little tech venture takes all its clients seriously, regardless of gender. The next hour would determine the future of both Morrison & Blake and my marriage. But whatever happened, Boston's financial world would never again dismiss a woman as just a trophy wife. Andrew reviews their press materials with his lawyer's analytical eye. Careful language, but the target is clear. They're positioning Harman's inclusive approach as sacrificing quality for political correctness, while conveniently ignoring our sales figures and critical acclaim, I note. The marketplace has already rendered its verdict. Innovation and tradition aren't mutually exclusive, I counter diplomatically. Quality storytelling transcends either category. Marcus, perhaps sensing the underlying tension, steers the conversation toward neutral industry topics. As we exchange polite small talk, I notice Richard studying me with an expression I can't quite decipher. Not the dismissive glance of our first meeting, but something more complex. When the ceremony begins, we separate to our respective tables. Harman's authors receive 2 major awards, while Alliance publishers claim 1. The industry's bifurcated direction is reflected even in critical recognition. After the ceremony, Caroline approaches with surprising news. "Richard asked to speak with me privately," she reports. "He wanted to know if I'd consider rejoining him at the Alliance." "In what capacity?" I ask, genuinely curious. "Editorial director for women's fiction," she replies with evident bemusement. He said they're expanding their approach to include more diverse perspectives while maintaining quality standards. The irony isn't lost on any of us. Richard, who once dismissed female perspectives as secondary, now recognizes their market value, but only after Harmon demonstrated it conclusively. "What did you tell him?" Andrew asks. "That I appreciate the recognition of my editorial judgment, but I'm fully committed to Harmon's vision." Her smile holds quiet satisfaction, though I did suggest several excellent female editors he might consider if he's serious about diversity. As we depart, I catch Richard watching our group with an expression that finally becomes clear: reluctant recognition. He hasn't surrendered. His belief in traditional approaches, but he can no longer dismiss our success as temporary or inconsequential. The housewife he overlooked at dinner has forced an industry-wide reckoning that even he must acknowledge. The battle for publishing's futur. Their shareholders are clearly relieved. As part of this transition, William continued, his voice carrying only a slight tremor, I am announcing my retirement as chairman. The board has voted to appoint new leadership more suited to guiding the firm through its digital transformation. Now, that was unexpected. William Morrison stepping down voluntarily? I'd anticipated having to force that move later. Morrison and Blake's new chairperson, subject to board approval, will be... William paused, clearly struggling with the words. Alexandra Chen. The room fell silent. Even I sat stunned for a moment. They weren't just accepting our offer. They were surrendering completely, handing me control of both companies. My phone exploded with notifications. The financial press was going wild. Boston's most traditional investment bank would now be led by the woman they'd once dismissed as just another trophy wife. Alexandra, Sarah interrupted my thoughts. Richard's here. I turned to see my husband standing in the conference room doorway, looking both defeated and somehow relieved. Gone was the polished CFO from the promotion party. This Richard looked humbled, human. Could we have the room? I asked my team. They filed out, Marcus squeezing my shoulder as he passed. I saw William's announcement, Richard said, remaining by the door. Congratulations. Thank you. I gestured to a chair. I read your resignation letter. He sat, loosening his tie. I meant every word. I've spent years taking you for granted, being threatened by your success instead of celebrating. That comment at the party, it wasn't just a stupid slip. It revealed how I really saw you, how I'd been trying to diminish you to make myself feel bigger. On the screens behind him, financial analysts were dissecting the merger, praising Innovatech's strategic genius. None of them had seen us coming until it was too late. What happens now? Richard asked quietly. Professionally, Morrison and Blake will be modernized, brought into the digital age. The combined companies will be stronger than either was alone. I met his eyes. Personally? That depends on you. I don't know if I can work for my wife, he admitted. That's not what I'm offering. I'm offering you the chance to work with your wife, to be true partners, personally and professionally. But only if you can really see me, not as a trophy, not as a threat, but as an equal. Richard was quiet for a long moment, watching the screens where his former firm's transformation was being discussed. I've never told you this, he finally said, but the night we met, at that charity gala, I was terrified to approach you. You were so brilliant, so clearly destined for success. Somewhere along the way, I started trying to dim your light instead of basking in it. And now? Additional credibility combined with progressive direction is powerful positioning, and signals the alliance's vulnerability, Thomas adds. If Blackwood is jumping ship, others will follow. We should prepare for industry consolidation, I decide. The next phase will likely involve significant restructuring as traditional publishers either evolve or combine to survive. Over the following weeks, signs of the alliance's struggles become increasingly visible. Two member publishers announce strategic reorganizations. A major alliance author publicly questions their marketing support. Industry analysts revise revenue projections downward. When Andrew and I attend a charity gala the following month, Richard is noticeably absent, though several alliance executives attend. Their conversations seem strained. The marble lobby of Morrison & Blake felt different as I walked through it the next morning. The same security guards who had once barely glanced at me when I visited Richard now stood at attention. The receptionists who dismissed me as just another executive's wife scrambled to greet their new chairperson. Richard walked beside me, no longer the confident CFO, but a man still finding his footing in this new reality. We'd spent hours talking last night, really talking, for the first time in years. "Ready?" he asked as we approached the executive floor. "I've been ready for years," I replied. "The question is, are they ready for me?" The boardroom was packed. When we entered, the old guard of Morrison & Blake sat mixed with Innovatex executives, like oil and water refusing to blend. William Morrison sat in his usual chair, though he'd moved one seat over from the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming," I began, taking my place at the head of the table. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for both our companies." I outlined the integration plan, how Morrison & Blake's traditional strengths would be enhanced by Innovatex digital innovations, how we'd retain the firm's prestigious name while modernizing its operations. "Some of you know me only as Richard Walker's wife," I continued, noting how several board members shifted uncomfortably. "Others know me as the CEO who orchestrated this takeover. Today, I'm here as someone who believes in combining the best of both worlds, traditional banking expertise and cutting-edge technology." The morning unfolded in a whirlwind of meetings, presentations, and decisions. I watched Richard navigate his new role, offering insights on Morrison & Blake's operations while deferring to my leadership. It was a delicate dance, but he was trying. Around noon, Patricia Morrison appeared in my new office, William's old sanctuary now transformed by Sarah's efficient redesign. "The ladies' committee was wondering," she began hesitantly, "if you'll still be hosting the annual charity gala?" I looked up from the integration reports. "Actually, I'm expanding it. This year's theme will be Women in Finance. We'll be announcing a scholarship program for female business students." Patricia blinked, processing this transformation of her social event into something more meaningful. I see. And will Richard be involved?" "My husband will be supporting the initiative, yes. Just as I supported him all those years." I smiled. "Though I won't be expecting him to just stand there and look decorative." After she left, Richard appeared with lunch, sushi from my favorite place, not his usual steakhouse. "The trading floor is nervous," he reported. "They're worried about job cuts. Only for those who refuse to adapt." I opened the contracts Sarah had prepared. "Speaking of which, we need to discuss your new role." He tensed slightly. "Alexandra, I told you I don't expect—" "Head of Client Relations," I cut him off. "Your strength was always in maintaining relationships with traditional clients. Help them understand and embrace our digital transformation. Working alongside you, not under you." "Exactly." I met his eyes. "Partners, Richard. That's what we should have been all along." He studied the contract, and I watched emotions play across his face. Pride, humility, understanding. "Partners," he finally agreed, signing his name. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Our stock had hit another record high as markets digested news of the smooth integration. Sarah appeared with more updates, client calls, press requests, and an invitation to speak at Harvard Business School about the merger. "Should I keep your maiden name for the Harvard event?" she asked. "Alexandra Chen, rather than Alexandra Walker?" I considered this as Richard looked up from his contract. "Use both," I decided. "Alexandra Chen Walker. Time to show Boston what it looks like when a trophy wife decides to reshape the whole display case. The afternoon brought a parade of Morrison and Blake executives, each trying to secure their position in the new order. I listened as they pitched themselves, noting who focused on innovation and who clung to tradition. "It's like watching dinosaurs realize the climate is changing," Richard observed after one particularly resistant managing director left. "They'll adapt or they'll go extinct," I replied. "Just like you did," he smiled ruefully. "I prefer to think of it as evolution. Speaking of which, my mother called. She wants us over for dinner again." "To celebrate or to surrender?" "Both, probably." He straightened his tie, a new one, I noticed, not from his usual collection of conservative stripes. "She said she's been reading about Innovatech. Actually reading, not just dismissing it as her daughter-in-law's hobby. Progress, however small, was still progress. Tell her we'll come, but this time I choose the wine. As the day wound down, I stood at the window of my new office, looking out over the Boston skyline. Below, the financial district hummed with activity, processing the shock waves of our merger. Richard appeared in the doorway. "Ready to head home?" "Almost." I turned to face him. "Just thinking about that promotion party. You know, when you called me your trophy wife, you actually gave me a gift." "Oh?" "You gave me the perfect moment to stop playing small, to stop pretending to be less than I am." I gathered my things. Sometimes the best motivation comes from being underestimated. Together, we walked through the now quiet offices of Morrison and Blake. The portraits of past chairmen lined the walls, all men, all cut from the same cloth. Soon my portrait would join them, breaking centuries of tradition. "They still don't know what hit them," Richard mused as we reached the lobby. I smiled, thinking of all the other trophy wives out there, watching and taking notes. "No," I agreed. "But they're about to learn that some trophies refuse to stay on the shelf." 1 month after the merger, I stood at a podium in Harvard Business School's largest auditorium, facing a sea of eager faces. The young women in the audience leaned forward in their seats, while their male classmates shifted uncomfortably. "Success isn't just about breaking glass ceilings," I told them. "It's about changing the entire architecture of power. Sometimes that means playing along with others' expectations until the perfect moment to shatter them." In the front row, Richard sat with our executive team, watching as I described the strategy behind Innovatech's takeover of Morrison and Blake. He no longer looked uncomfortable when I discussed his role in the story, how his dismissive comment at his promotion party had triggered the final phase of my plan. "The business world is changing," I continued. "Old hierarchies are falling, but change doesn't always come from direct confrontation. Sometimes it comes from being underestimated, from letting others see what they expect to see until you're ready to show them who you really are." The Q&A session that followed was dominated by female students, each one carrying her own stories of being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. I saw myself in their ambitious eyes, remembered my own days at Harvard, planning the company that would eventually reshape Boston's financial landscape. "Mrs. Chen Walker," one young woman asked, "what advice would you give to someone whose boss or partner doesn't take their ambitions seriously?" I smiled, catching Richard's eye in the audience. "Document everything. Build your strength quietly. And when the moment comes to show your true capabilities, make sure everyone who underestimated you has a front row seat to your success." After the lecture, Richard and I walked through Harvard Yard, memories of our own courtship mixing with the reality of our transformed relationship. "You know," he said, "I keep thinking about all the dinner parties where I talked over you, all the times I dismissed your insights because I was too insecure to acknowledge your brilliance." "Careful," I teased. "You're starting to sound like one of those sensitivity training videos Morrison and Blake's HR department keeps pushing." He laughed, but his eyes were serious. "I mean it, Alexandra. Watching you today, seeing how those students responded to your story, I finally understand what I almost lost by trying to dim your light. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. The latest market reports showed the merged company's value had doubled since the takeover. Morrison and Blake's old guard clients were embracing our digital platforms faster than projected. Speaking of understanding, I said, your mother called. The women's investment group she started after our family dinner is ready to launch. She wants me to speak at their first meeting. Richard stopped walking, turning to face me. Eleanor? Walker, champion of female investors. Will wonders never cease? People can surprise you when you give them the chance to evolve. I straightened his tie, one I'd bought him last week, modern and bold. Even trophy wives can turn out to be corporate raiders in disguise. We had dinner reservations at the same restaurant where we'd first met, back when I was a promising entrepreneur, and he was a rising star at Morrison and Blake. But first, we had one more stop to make. The Morrison and Blake building lobby had been transformed. Where portraits of stern-faced men once dominated the walls, a new installation celebrated innovation and diversity. And there, in the center, was a photograph from Richard's promotion party. Me in that emerald dress, playing my role perfectly while plotting a corporate takeover. Your idea? Richard asked, noting the installation for the first time. A reminder, I replied. For everyone who walks through these doors, never assume you know someone's full potential based on how they look or who they're married to. My phone buzzed again. William Morrison, of all people, requesting a meeting to discuss expanding our digital services globally. Apparently, retirement had given him a new perspective on the future of finance. Dinner? Richard offered his arm, a gesture that once symbolized ownership but now felt like partnership. Lead the way. I smiled. Or better yet, walk beside me. As we left the building, I caught our reflection in the gleaming lobby windows. No longer the trophy wife and her successful husband, but true partners, equals in both business and life. The merger had transformed more than just our companies. It had transformed us, our marriage, and maybe even a small corner of the business world's understanding of power and potential. Richard held the door for me, not because I needed him to, but because he chose to. You know, he said as we stepped into the evening air, I finally understand what you meant about trophies having sharp edges. Oh? They're meant to be symbols of victory, he mused. But in the right hands, they can also be weapons of change. I thought of all the other women out there, playing their expected roles while nurturing their own ambitions. Sometimes, I agreed. The most powerful move is letting everyone think you're just a trophy, right up until the moment you decide to rewrite the rules of the game. The Boston skyline. 3 months after the merger, I sat in my office reviewing the quarterly reports when Sarah rushed in, tablet in hand. You need to see this, she said, pulling up a video that was rapidly going viral. It showed Patricia Morrison at a women's business conference of all places, discussing how watching my takeover of Morrison and Blake had transformed her understanding of power dynamics in finance. I spent years judging women like Alexandra Chen Walker based on how well they fit into our social circle, she admitted to the audience. Meanwhile, she was building an empire right under our perfectly powdered noses. That's the third wife of a Morrison and Blake executive to publicly support our modernization efforts this week, Sarah noted. They're calling it the trophy wife revolution on social media. I smiled, remembering all those charity committee meetings where these same women had dismissed my business acumen. Send Patricia flowers and an invitation to join our board's technology committee. Richard appeared in my doorway, looking amused. Have you seen the latest Harvard Business Review? They're using our merger as a case study in hidden strategic advantages. The Underestimated Edge, How Gender Bias Created the Perfect Cover for Corporate Disruption. I quoted the article's title. Marcus sent me an advance copy. Speaking of Marcus, Richard sat down, loosening his new modernized tie. He says, "Our digital trading platform is outperforming projections by 40%. Even William is impressed." The mention of William Morrison brought a fresh wave of satisfaction. The former chairman had called yesterday, asking for my advice on launching a venture capital fund focused on women-led tech startups. The irony was delicious. "Your mother's investment group is doing well too," I noted, pulling up their performance metrics. "They're outperforming traditional portfolios by focusing on companies with strong female leadership." "Who would have thought?" Richard mused. "Eleanor Walker, champion of feminist investing, though she still wants us over for Sunday dinner." My phone buzzed with a message from Janet Wong, our head of legal. More Morrison and Blake partners were accepting our digital transition package, abandoning their resistance to change. The old guard was finally evolving. "Did you see today's visitor list?" Sarah asked, pulling up my schedule. 3 more wives of financial executives requesting meetings. Apparently, they all have little companies they'd like to discuss. "Book them," I instructed. "And send them our standard startup evaluation package. Let's see how many other hidden empires are out there waiting for their moment." Richard watched this exchange with a mixture of admiration and residual guilt. "You're inspiring them to stop hiding their potential." "No," I corrected. "I'm showing them they never needed anyone's permission to claim their power in the first place." A notification popped up on my screen. The Wall Street Journal wanted to interview us for a feature on power couples reshaping traditional industries. The suggested title, "From Trophy Wife to Corporate Titan, the partnership that transformed Boston finance." "Should we do it?" Richard asked. I considered the impact our story could have on other couples locked in outdated power dynamics. Yes, but on one condition: we tell the whole truth. About how your dismissal of my success almost cost you everything. About how real partnership means celebrating your spouse's ambitions instead of feeling threatened by them. He nodded, understanding the value of honest reflection. "Maybe it will help other men avoid my mistakes." Sarah interrupted with more updates. The hashtag #OdsterTrophyWife Revolution was trending nationally. Women were sharing stories of being underestimated, overlooked, dismissed, and how they were using that prejudice as cover for their own ambitions. "You've started a movement," Richard observed. "No," I smiled, thinking of all the quiet revolutionaries in stilettos and designer dresses, building their strength behind carefully maintained facades. "I just gave them permission to drop their masks." My phone lit up with another message. This one from a major tech magazine. "Women in Tech, the Hidden Army Transforming Finance." They wanted to profile not just me, but our entire female leadership team. "Book it," I told Sarah. "It's time to show the world what happens when you mistake decoration for determination." As the day wound down, I stood at my office window, watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in shades of possibility. The merger had done more than just combine 2 companies. It had cracked open a door that could never be closed again. Richard joined me at the window, our reflections overlapping in the glass. "You know what the best part is?" he asked. "What's that?" Knowing that somewhere out there, another underestimated wife is sitting at her husband's business dinner, smiling politely while she plots her own revolution. I thought of all the women I'd met recently, their eyes shining with newfound permission to dream bigger. "The trophy wife era is ending," I agreed. "The age of the hidden CEO is just beginning." As if to punctuate my words, Sarah appeared with fresh market reports. Our stock had hit another record high, driven by news of our digital platform's success. The old boys club of Boston finance would never be the same, and somewhere in the city, another perfectly polished corporate wife was taking notes, biding her time, waiting for her moment to transform from trophy to titan. 6 months after the merger, I stood at the entrance of the Four Seasons Ballroom, the same venue where Richard's fateful promotion party had sparked our corporate revolution. Tonight was the annual Morrison and Blake Charity Gala, but with a significant Twist, the theme was Women in Finance, Breaking Barriers, Building Futures. Ready? Richard asked, adjusting his cufflinks, not the conservative gold ones he'd worn 6 months ago, but modern platinum pieces I'd given him to mark our new beginning. Born ready, I smiled, thinking of all the galas where I'd played the quiet, supportive wife. Tonight would be different. The ballroom had been transformed. Instead of the usual portraits of stern-faced banking patriarchs, the walls displayed images of female financial pioneers. Our new scholarship recipients, 20 young women from underprivileged backgrounds, were the guests of honor. William Morrison approached, looking almost comfortable in his reduced role as chairman emeritus. Alexandra, Richard, quite a turnout. Indeed, the crowd was different from previous years. Alongside the traditional banking executives were tech entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and a notable number of women in leadership positions. I spotted several former trophy wives who had recently launched their own ventures. William, I greeted him warmly. I saw the announcement about your women's tech fund. Impressive first investments. He actually blushed. Yes, well, your success made me realize how much talent I'd been overlooking. Patricia's quite involved in the selection process. As if summoned, Patricia Morrison appeared, looking energized, in a way I'd never seen during her years as the firm's unofficial social director. Alexandra, the Harvard Business School dean is here. She's interested in our mentorship program. The mentorship program had been Patricia's idea, pairing experienced businesswomen with promising students, creating a pipeline of female talent. That would have been unthinkable in Morrison and Blake's old boys club days. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Our latest market analysis had just come in. The merged company's value had tripled since the takeover, driven by the success of our digital platforms and the flood of new clients attracted by our innovative approach. Speech time, Richard murmured, nodding toward the podium. I took my place at the microphone, surveying the room. 6 months ago, I'd stood silently by while Richard called me his trophy wife. Tonight, I commanded the attention of Boston's entire financial elite. Welcome to the new era of Morrison and Blake, I began. Some of you knew me first as Richard Walker's wife, then as the CEO who orchestrated a hostile takeover of this storied institution. Tonight, I stand before you as proof that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one you've been trained not to see. The scholarship recipients leaned forward in their seats, hanging on every word. These young women would never have to hide their ambitions. Look around this room, I continued. How many other hidden talents are here tonight? How many dreams have been dismissed because they came wrapped in designer dresses instead of power suits? The revolution we started 6 months ago isn't just about merging companies or modernizing banks. It's about recognizing that power doesn't always look the way we expect it to. I saw several women in the audience nodding, their eyes fierce with recognition. One of them was a major investment firm's CEO's wife, who had recently revealed herself as a brilliant AI researcher. Another had just launched a successful fintech startup after years of being known only for her charity work. The future of finance isn't just about technology, I declared. It's about transformation. About recognizing that innovation can come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the most dangerous mistake you can make is underestimating someone because of how they look or who they're married to. Richard watched from the side of the stage, his expression a mix of pride and lingering amazement at how thoroughly I'd upended his world. So here's to the next generation of financial leaders. I raised my glass. To the women who won't have to hide their brilliance. To the partners who will celebrate each other's success instead of competing for dominance. And yes, to all the trophy wives out there who are secretly plotting their own revolutions. The room erupted in applause. I saw Eleanor Walker wiping away tears, her investment group's success giving her a new appreciation for female potential. William Morrison clapped vigorously, his journey from dismissive patriarch to champion of change complete. As I stepped down from the podium, a young scholarship recipient approached. "Mrs. Chenwalker, would you believe my boyfriend's father told me to focus on looking pretty instead of studying finance?" I smiled, remembering all the similar comments I'd endured while building Innovatech. "Keep studying," I advised. "And remember, sometimes being underestimated is your greatest advantage." Richard joined us, his arms sliding naturally around my waist, no longer a gesture of possession but one of partnership. "Telling her your secret strategy?" he teased. "Just sharing some wisdom about the power of perception," I replied. After all, everyone knows trophy wives are just decorative, right up until the moment they're not. The young woman's eyes sparkled with understanding. She returned to her table with new purpose, perhaps already plotting her own path to power. "You've changed this world," Richard observed as we watched her go. "Not just the company, but the whole landscape." "No," I corrected him, watching the room full of awakened ambition and transformed relationships. "We've all changed it, one shattered expectation at a time." 1 year to the day after Richard's promotion party, we sat in our newly renovated penthouse, watching the sun set over Boston Harbor. The cityscape had changed since that night. Or maybe it was just my perspective that had shifted. "Hard to believe it's only been a year," Richard mused, loosening his tie after a long day of client meetings. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." "Missing your trophy wife?" I teased, setting aside quarterly reports that showed our merged company's continued dominance in digital finance. "Missing my illusions," he corrected. "About power, about partnership, about what real success looks like." My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. The Wall Street Journal had named me their CEO of the year. The accompanying article highlighted not just the successful merger, but the cultural transformation it had sparked across the financial sector. Speaking of success, Richard nodded toward the TV, where CNBC was running a feature on the trophy wife revolution I'd inspired. 3 more executive wives launched tech startups this month. They're calling you their patron saint. I smiled, remembering all the quiet conversations I'd had recently with women who'd been inspired to stop hiding their ambitions. Every revolution needs a catalyst. I just happened to be married to the right underestimator at the right time. The elevator pinged, announcing Sarah's arrival with our evening briefing. "The numbers from the Women's Investment Fund are in," she reported. "Eleanor's group has outperformed traditional portfolios by 30%. Mother's quite proud of that," Richard noted. "Though she still hasn't quite forgiven me for not seeing what was right in front of me all those years." "Has anyone told her about Patricia Morrison's new venture?" I asked. William's wife had surprised everyone by revealing her own tech background, launching a successful cybersecurity firm. "It's all over the business news," Sarah confirmed. "Another trophy wife transformation. The old boys club is getting nervous." "Good," I said, thinking of all the dismissive comments and patronizing pats on the head I'd endured while building Innovatech. "They should be." Richard moved to the window, staring out at the financial district where Morrison and Blake's building now sported our combined logos. "You know what the strangest part is? I'm happier now than when I thought I was in control. Having a real partner instead of a trophy wife. It's liberating. Amazing what happens when you let go of outdated power dynamics." I joined him at the window. "Speaking of which, how was your lunch with James Patterson?" He grinned. "My old college roommate sends his regards, and his resignation from Global Tech. Apparently, he's interested in joining our digital innovation team." "Under your supervision?" "Under yours," he corrected. "He was quite impressed by how thoroughly you outmaneuvered us both." My phone lit up with another message, Marcus confirming our expansion plans for Asia. The merger had given us global reach, transforming both companies into something greater than either could have been alone. "I've been thinking," Richard said carefully, "about writing a book, about how my biggest Professional mistake was underestimating my greatest personal asset. Sounds interesting. I turned from the window. What would you call it? The trophy wife strategy. How gender bias creates corporate blind spots. Though your title would probably be better. How about underestimated? The power of being overlooked. I suggested. We could co-author it. Show both sides of the story. Sarah appeared with more updates. Our stock had hit another record high. 3 more traditional banks had approached us about digital partnerships, and Harvard Business School wanted us to develop a case study about the merger. Look at this. She handed me her tablet. On the screen was a photo from exactly 1 year ago. Richard and me at his promotion party, him basking in his moment of triumph, while I smiled the perfect trophy wife smile, already plotting his professional demise. Frame it, I decided. Put it in the company lobby with a new caption. The moment everything changed. Or be careful what you wish for, Richard suggested wryly. I wanted a trophy wife, and I got a corporate raider instead. You got what you always had, I corrected him. You just finally learned to see it properly. As the sun set over Boston, casting long shadows across the financial district we'd transformed, I thought about all the other hidden revolutionaries out there. Women playing their expected roles while nurturing secret ambitions. Wives being underestimated by the very men who should have been their biggest champions. Happy anniversary, Richard said softly, offering me a glass of champagne. To the end of my illusions and the beginning of real partnership. I took the glass, remembering all the corporate events where I'd sipped champagne quietly while men talked business around me. To the power of being underestimated, I countered, and to all the trophy wives out there secretly planning their own revolutions. The city lights began to twinkle on, each one a potential beacon for another hidden CEO preparing to emerge from behind her carefully maintained facade. The game was changing, the rules being rewritten, one shattered expectation at a time, and somewhere out there, another perfectly polished corporate wife was sitting at another business dinner, smiling serenely while she plotted her own rise to power. The trophy wife era was ending, but the revolution was just beginning. 18 months after the merger, I sat in my office reviewing an unsettling report from our compliance team. They'd uncovered irregularities in Morrison & Blake's pre-merger international dealings, transactions that pointed to potentially serious violations during William Morrison's tenure as chairman. How bad is it? Richard asked, studying my expression as I digested the information. Bad enough to undo everything we've built if it becomes public, I replied, handing him the report. These transactions, they're exactly the kind of old-school, corporate misconduct that could taint our entire transformation story. Sarah appeared with more urgent updates. The SEC has requested a meeting. Apparently, they've received an anonymous tip. I exchanged glances with Richard. We both knew who was likely behind this. David Reynolds, the former partner who'd helped orchestrate Richard's rise to CFO. He'd been quietly seething since our takeover, and now he'd found his weapon. Get me William Morrison, I instructed. Sarah. And call Marcus. We need to get ahead of this. Within an hour, William sat in my office, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I always knew this might surface, he admitted, reviewing the transactions. It was standard practice back then, but now it could destroy everything, I finished. Not just Morrison & Blake's legacy, but the changes we've implemented, the opportunities we've created for women in finance. Richard paced by the window, his new role as head of client relations suddenly complicated by old sins. The old boys club protecting itself at any cost. It's exactly the kind of behavior we've been working to change. My phone buzzed with a message from Eleanor Walker. News of the investigation was already spreading through Boston's social circles. The whispers had begun. We have 2 choices, I announced, standing to face both men. We can try to bury this, use our connections to make it disappear, exactly what the old Morrison & Blake would have done. Or we can get ahead of it, turn this crisis into another opportunity for transformation. How? William asked, his usual confidence shaken. By showing that the new Morrison and Blake handles problems differently than the old one did. No cover-ups, no old boys network protecting its own. Complete transparency and accountability. Richard stopped pacing, understanding dawning in his eyes. You want to expose everything ourselves? Not just expose it, I smiled, already seeing the strategy unfold. Transform it. Turn this crisis into a case study in corporate evolution. I outlined my plan. A voluntary disclosure program, a public commitment to ethical reform, and a new initiative funding investigations into financial industry misconduct. We would position the old violations as evidence of why our digital transformation was necessary, why the old ways of doing business had to change. It's risky, William protested. Some of our oldest clients might not survive this level of scrutiny. Then maybe they shouldn't survive, I replied firmly. This industry's culture of protecting wrongdoing, of men covering for other men while calling their wives trophies, it all has to end. Sarah interrupted with breaking news. David? Reynolds had given an interview, hinting at explosive revelations about Morrison and Blake's past. He thought he was dealing the killing blow to our merger. Perfect timing, I said, surprising both men. Now we can show everyone the difference between old power and new leadership. I drafted a press release announcing our voluntary disclosure program. The language was clear and unsparing. We would investigate ourselves more thoroughly than any regulator could using our digital tools to uncover every questionable transaction. This could cost us billions, William warned. It could save the soul of this company, I corrected, and show everyone that the trophy wife they underestimated isn't just good at taking power. She knows how to use it responsibly. Richard read the press release, pride mixing with concern on his face. You're really going to air all our dirty laundry? Not our dirty laundry, I reminded him. The old guard's secrets. The same men who dismissed me, who treated women like decorative accessories while they broke rules and protected each other. It's time for their way of doing business to end. As the day progressed, our strategy took shape. Marcus prepared to reach out to major shareholders. Sarah coordinated with PR firms, and I sat down to record a video message that would shake Boston's financial world to its core. A year ago, I began, looking directly into the camera. I was dismissed as a trophy wife at my husband's promotion party. Today, I'm announcing the most comprehensive self-investigation ever undertaken by a major financial institution. Because real change isn't just about who holds power, it's about how they use it. William watched the recording, shaking his head in amazement. You're going to destroy everything we built. No, I corrected him. I'm going to rebuild it properly this time. Because some trophies aren't meant to celebrate the past. They're meant to inspire the future. As night fell over Boston, I stood at my office window, watching lights flicker in the financial district. Tomorrow, our announcement would send shockwaves through those gleaming towers. The old boys' club would scramble to contain the damage, to protect their remaining secrets. But they'd already lost, because this trophy wife wasn't just taking their power, she was rewriting the rules of how that power worked. Ready for this? Richard asked, joining me at the window. I thought of all the other corporate wives out there, watching and waiting for their own moments of transformation. Ready to show everyone what real change looks like. The city sparkled below, unaware that tomorrow would bring another revolution. David Reynolds thought he could use the past to destroy us. Instead, he'd given me the perfect opportunity to demonstrate exactly why the old way of doing business had to end. Sometimes the best way to break a system is to expose its foundations. And who better to do that than the woman they never thought would have the power to change everything? The morning after our announcement, Boston's financial district was in chaos. Our stock had taken an initial hit, but something unexpected was happening. Transparency was proving more powerful than tradition. Look at this, Sarah said, rushing into my office with her tablet. Major institutional investors were publicly praising our voluntary disclosure program. The hashtag #JarkNewMorrisonBlake was trending, with people sharing stories of how the old financial industry had failed them. David Reynolds just called a press conference, Richard announced, entering with his own updates. He looks nervous. He should be, I replied, reviewing the latest findings from our internal investigation. His fingerprints are all over some of the worst transactions. My phone buzzed with a message from Patricia Morrison. "William's not handling this well," she wrote. "But I want you to know, I support what you're doing. The old ways needed to end." The day unfolded in a blur of revelations and responses. Our compliance team, using Innovatech's advanced analytics, was uncovering decades of questionable practices. But instead of destroying us, each disclosure seemed to strengthen our position as leaders of industry reform. "The SEC is impressed," Marcus reported during our emergency board meeting. "They're suggesting other firms follow our example." "Of course they are," I smiled. "Because we're not just exposing problems, we're showing them a better way forward." Eleanor Walker appeared in my office around noon, looking both shaken and determined. "The investment group wants to make a statement," she announced. "Supporting your reforms. It's time for women to have a voice in how this industry operates." I thought about all the times women had been excluded from important decisions, relegated to planning parties while men made backroom deals. "Draft it," I instructed. "Show everyone that the future of finance isn't just about digital transformation. It's about cultural transformation." Richard spent the day meeting with nervous clients, explaining our vision for a more transparent industry. Some threatened to leave, clinging to the old ways. But others, particularly younger clients and women-led companies, were increasing their investments. "It's like watching the old guard and the new guard choose sides," he observed during a brief lunch break. "No," I corrected him. "It's like watching the trophy wives of the world realize they don't have to play by the old rules anymore." David Reynolds's press conference turned into a disaster when reporters, armed with information from our disclosures, asked him pointed questions about his own role in the questionable transactions. He stormed out, but not before accidentally, implying that more senior figures might have been involved. "The district attorney's office is interested," Sarah reported. "They're particularly focused on how the Old Boys Network protected itself." I stood at my office window watching protesters gather outside Morrison and Blake's building. But they weren't protesting against us. Their signs demanded other financial institutions follow our lead in transparency. "Look what you've started," William Morrison said quietly, appearing behind me. He'd aged years in a day, the weight of past decisions finally catching up. "No," I turned to face him. "Look what you started. When you dismissed me as Richard's trophy wife, you showed me exactly what needed to change in this industry." My phone lit up with a message from one of our scholarship recipients. "You're showing us that real power isn't about protecting secrets. It's about having the courage to expose them." As evening approached, Marcus brought more unexpected news. Our stock had recovered and was actually trading higher than before the announcement. The market, it seemed, valued honesty over tradition. "The Old Boys Club is falling apart," Richard reported after his final client meeting. "Other firms' executives are starting to come forward with their own disclosures, trying to get ahead of investigations." I smiled, remembering all the corporate events where I'd listened quietly while men boasted about their deals and connections. Amazing how quickly a system collapses once someone breaks the code of silence. Sarah appeared with the latest social media analytics. Women across the financial industry were sharing their own stories of being sidelined, dismissed, treated as decorative while important decisions were made without them. "It's not just about the transactions anymore," she observed. "It's becoming a movement." "It always was," I replied, thinking of all the hidden talent that had been overlooked by the old system. "We just needed the right moment to show everyone what real change looks like." As night fell over Boston, I received one final message. From James Patterson, Richard's old college roommate who'd tried to help him stop our takeover. "You were right," he wrote. "The old way of doing business had to end. Thank you for having the courage to end it." I showed the message to Richard, who had finished drafting our next day's strategy. "Funny," he mused. "A year ago, they thought calling you my trophy wife was a compliment." "It was," I smiled. "Just not the kind they meant. Because sometimes the best trophies aren't the ones that sit quietly on shelves. They're the ones that shine so brightly they expose everything around them." Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more challenges, more opportunities for transformation. But tonight, watching Boston's lights twinkle through my office window, I felt the satisfaction of knowing that the trophy wife revolution had evolved into something even more powerful, a complete reimagining of what power could look like, in the hands of those who had been underestimated for too long. 2 years to the day after Richard's fateful promotion party, I stood in the transformed Morrison & Blake boardroom, preparing to address our annual shareholders' meeting. The room had changed. Gone were the old portraits of stern-faced men, replaced by digital displays showing real-time market data and social impact metrics. "Ready?" Richard asked, adjusting his tablet. As head of client relations, he'd helped navigate us through the turbulent waters of our industry transformation. "Born ready," I replied, thinking of all the board meetings where I'd been dismissed as just another executive's wife. The room filled with a different kind of crowd than the old Morrison & Blake had attracted. Yes, there were still traditional investors, but now they sat alongside tech entrepreneurs, social impact funds, and a notably diverse group of individual shareholders. "The numbers are strong," Marcus reported, bringing up our latest results. The merged company had not just survived our transparency revolution. We'd thrived, our stock value quadrupling as other firms scrambled to catch up with both our digital innovations and our ethical reforms. Sarah appeared with breaking news. "David Reynolds just pleaded guilty. He's agreeing to testify about the entire Old Boys network." I nodded, unsurprised. The former partner's attempt to destroy us had instead accelerated the industry's transformation. His press conference had started a domino effect of revelations that was still rippling through Boston's financial world. "Patricia Morrison is here," Sarah added, with her new Women in Finance delegation. William's wife had emerged as a powerful advocate for industry reform, turning her social connections into a network for change. The ladies who once judged me at charity galas now sought my advice on corporate governance and digital strategy. Eleanor Walker arrived next, accompanied by her investment group's executive board. "The latest fund performance figures," she announced proudly, handing me a report. "We're outperforming traditional portfolios by 40%. Because you're investing in the future," I replied, "not protecting the past." The shareholders' meeting began with a video montage, clips from Richard's promotion party, the merger announcement, our transparency initiative launch, and the waves of change that followed. The audience watched as 2 years of transformation played out on screen. 2 years ago, I began my address. I stood in this building's lobby wearing an emerald dress and a practiced smile, playing the role of the perfect corporate wife. Today, I stand before you as proof that real power doesn't always look like what we expect it to. The room was silent, attentive. These weren't people who needed to be convinced anymore. They were believers who'd profited from our revolution. Our transparency initiative has uncovered decades of industry misconduct, I continued. But more importantly, it's revealed something else: the tremendous waste of talent and potential that occurs when we let bias and tradition limit our vision of what leadership looks like. Screens around the room displayed our latest metrics: record profits, unprecedented client growth, and something new in financial industry reports: social impact scores measuring our contribution to market reform. The old Morrison & Blake measured success in dollars and deals. I gestured to the data. The new Morrison & Blake measures it in transformation and truth. Because real power isn't about protecting privileged positions, it's about creating Opportunities for everyone with the talent and determination to seize them. Richard watched from his seat, no longer the insecure executive who needed to diminish his wife's success. Our marriage had evolved along with our company, proving that true partnership was stronger than old power dynamics. Look around this room. I challenged the audience. How many of you were once dismissed, overlooked, underestimated? How many were told to focus on appearing decorative rather than being effective? Hands rose throughout the room, not just women's hands, but those of anyone who'd ever been excluded from the old boys' network. That ends now, I declared. Because the future of finance isn't about maintaining traditions or protecting secrets. It's about harnessing all the talent that the old system wasted. The presentation continued with our plans for the future: more digital innovations, more ethical reforms, more opportunities for overlooked talent to rise. But the real message was in the room itself, in the diverse faces and voices that would have been excluded from such meetings just 2 years ago. After the formal proceedings, Eleanor approached with tears in her eyes. "I was wrong about you," she admitted. "We all were. We saw what we expected to see, not what was really there." "That was your mistake," I smiled, "and my advantage." Patricia Morrison joined us, her usual social butterfly persona replaced by serious purpose. "The other wives, the ones you inspired, they're starting a business coalition, supporting each other's ventures, sharing resources and connections." "Perfect," I approved, because the trophy wife revolution was never just about one company or one industry. It was about changing how power itself works. As the day wound down, I found myself back in my office, looking out over the city where I'd once played such a careful role. Boston's financial district glittered in the evening light, but it wasn't the same place it had been 2 years ago. Richard appeared in the doorway. "The old guard is officially dead," he reported. "The last holdouts are accepting our new governance standards. And the new guard? Growing stronger every day. 3 more executive wives just announced their own ventures. 3 years after the merger, I sat in the Harvard Business School auditorium, watching a new generation of female business leaders receive their diplomas. The Elizabeth Chen Walker Scholarship for Women in Finance had funded 20 of them, each one carrying dreams bigger than the old system would have allowed. Hard to believe this all started with a thoughtless comment at a party, Richard whispered beside me. He'd become a regular guest lecturer here, teaching about the dangers of unconscious bias in corporate leadership. "It started long before that," I corrected him. "That comment just gave me permission to stop hiding." The dean approached our seats during a break in the ceremony. "The case study about your takeover is now our most requested teaching material," she informed us. "Every business school in the country wants to understand the trophy wife revolution." McQuow. Phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Our latest acquisition had just been approved. Another old guard financial institution transforming under our leadership. But this time, their female executives had led the transition, tired of being sidelined by tradition. "Mrs. Chen Walker?" One of the graduating scholars approached, clutching her diploma. "I wanted to thank you, not just for the scholarship, but for showing us what's possible." I studied her eager face, remembering my own graduation day. "What's your plan now?" "I'm starting a fintech company," she announced proudly. "And I already have funding from Eleanor Walker's investment group." Richard smiled at the mention of his mother's now famous fund. Eleanor had become a powerful force in venture capital, specifically backing women-led startups that challenge traditional industry models. "The old boys network is officially dead," he reported as we watched the graduates celebrate. "The last 3 major firms just adopted our transparency standards." "Not dead," I corrected him. "Evolved, just like us." My phone lit up again. Patricia Morrison sharing photos from the latest Women in Finance Summit. The event she'd once used for social networking had become a powerful incubator for industry reform. "Remember when they thought calling me your trophy wife was a compliment?" I asked Richard as we left the ceremony. I remember thinking it was a way to make myself feel bigger, he admitted. I never realized I was actually making myself smaller by trying to diminish you. Back at our offices, Sarah had more updates. The Morrison & Blake digital platform had exceeded all growth projections. Our model of combining traditional banking expertise with technological innovation was being studied worldwide. The Financial Times wants to do a special feature, she reported. How the trophy wife revolution changed global finance. I thought about that emerald dress I'd worn to Richard's promotion party, now displayed in the company museum as a symbol of transformation. Tell them yes, but with one condition. We include stories of other women who've shattered their own glass ceilings. The afternoon brought a parade of visitors to my office. William Morrison, now retired but still advising our ethics committee. Eleanor Walker, discussing expansion plans for her investment fund. Even James Patterson, Richard's old college roommate, who'd become a vocal advocate for corporate culture reform. You didn't just change the company, James observed. You changed how we all think about power. Looking out my office window at the Boston skyline, I remembered all the corporate wives I'd met recently who were launching their own ventures, claiming their own power. The revolution hadn't just transformed our company, it had sparked a movement. The best part? Richard said, joining me at the window. Nobody underestimates the quiet ones anymore. Every corporate wife is now seen as a potential CEO in waiting. I smiled, thinking of all the women out there, playing their expected roles while nurturing their own ambitions. Sometimes the most powerful revolution is the one nobody sees coming. The sun set over Boston's financial district, casting long shadows across the buildings where old power had once seemed unshakable. But power, like everything else, evolves. Sometimes it just needs someone willing to shatter expectations to show everyone a new way forward. Ready for the board meeting? Sarah appeared with my notes. The new diversity initiatives are up for review. I gathered my materials, remembering all the board meetings where I'd been dismissed as just Richard's decorative wife. Ready to show everyone what real power looks like when it's shared instead of hoarded. As we walked to the boardroom, I passed the company museum where my emerald dress was displayed. Below it, a plaque read, "Sometimes the greatest power lies in being underestimated." Richard caught me looking at it. You know what the real legacy of the trophy wife revolution is? What's that? Now everyone knows that the most dangerous person in any room might be the one they're trained not to see. I thought of all the other hidden revolutionaries out there, waiting for their moment to transform their own corners of the world. The revolution never really ends, I agreed. It just keeps finding new trophy wives ready to show their true power. 4 years after the merger, I found myself back at the Four Seasons, the same hotel where Richard's promotion party had sparked our revolution. But this time, I wasn't playing the role of the quiet corporate wife. I was delivering the keynote address at the first Global Women in Finance Summit. The room is at capacity, Sarah reported, tablet in hand. Over 1,000 delegates, and the live stream has crashed twice from too many viewers. Looking out over the crowd, I saw faces that would have been excluded from such gatherings just a few years ago. Young entrepreneurs, emerging leaders, and yes, more than a few corporate wives with hidden ambitions gleaming in their eyes. Remember when this ballroom was just for men's business celebrations? Richard mused, adjusting his conference badge. He was scheduled to speak on a panel about transforming corporate culture. Remember when you thought that was normal? I teased. But there was no sting in it anymore. We'd both grown too much for old wounds to hurt. Eleanor Walker approached, surrounded by a group of young women, the latest recipients of her investment fund's backing. They wanted to meet the original trophy wife revolutionary, she explained, pride evident in her voice. I spent time with each of them, listening to their plans for disrupting various industries. One was developing AI for ethical investing. Another had created a platform for identifying gender bias in corporate communications. The best revenge, I told them, is showing everyone exactly what they missed by underestimating you. My phone buzzed with updates from Marcus. Our latest technology rollout had exceeded expectations. The merged Morrison and Blake was now the leading digital finance platform globally, our transparency standards becoming the industry norm. Mrs. Chen Walker? A familiar voice made me turn. Patricia Morrison stood there with her daughter, Emma, who just graduated from business school. Emma has something to tell you. The young woman straightened her shoulders. I'm turning down the traditional banking offers, she announced. I'm joining the new Women's Digital Finance Initiative instead. I smiled, remembering how her mother had once judged me for focusing on business instead of social duties. Now Patricia beamed with pride at her daughter's ambition. The old barriers are falling everywhere, Sarah reported during a break between sessions. 3 more major firms just appointed female CEOs. 2 of them used to be considered just corporate wives. The summit's afternoon session focused on the future, how to ensure the changes we'd sparked became permanent transformations. I watched as former trophy wives shared strategies for identifying and nurturing talent in unexpected places. The real challenge, Eleanor noted during her presentation, isn't just claiming power, it's changing how power itself works. I thought about that while listening to the next panel, where William Morrison himself spoke about the costs of maintaining old power structures. He'd become an unlikely ally in our revolution, his very presence validating the change we'd created. The next generation won't have to hide their ambitions, Richard observed as we watched young entrepreneurs pitch their ideas. They won't have to play small to make others feel big. No, I agreed. But they'll face their own challenges. That's why we're here, to make sure they have the support we didn't. The day's final event was a special ceremony recognizing the hidden leaders, women who had transformed their industries while being underestimated. As I presented the awards, I saw my own story reflected in their eyes, the careful patience, the quiet planning, the perfect moment of revelation. You've created something extraordinary, James Patterson said during the closing reception. My husband's former college roommate had become one of our strongest supporters, his own company now leading in corporate diversity. We all created it. I corrected him, watching the next generation of leaders networking across the ballroom. Every woman who ever smiled politely while being dismissed, every wife who built something while being called a trophy, we all contributed to this moment. As the evening wound down, I found myself back at the spot where Richard had once called me his trophy wife. The memory no longer stung. It had become a source of power, a reminder of how far we'd come. Thinking about that night? Richard asked, joining me. Thinking about all the other nights like it happening right now, I replied. All the other women being underestimated, gathering their strength, waiting for their moment. My phone lit up with messages from around the world, summit attendees sharing their own stories of hidden ambition and planned transformation. The trophy wife revolution had gone global, sparking change in boardrooms and balance sheets everywhere. You know what the best part is? Sarah asked, showing me the latest social media trends. Nobody ever uses trophy wife as a compliment anymore. Now it's a warning. A reminder that the most dangerous person in any room might be the one they're trained to overlook. I smiled, thinking of all the revolutions still to come. Sometimes the greatest power lies in being underestimated, and sometimes the quietest ones in the room are just waiting for the perfect moment to roar. 5 years to the day after Richard's promotion party, I stood in front of my closet, looking at the emerald dress that had started it all. We'd borrowed it back from the company museum for tonight's special occasion, the 5th anniversary, gala celebrating the merger that had transformed Boston's financial landscape. Having second thoughts about wearing it? Richard asked, adjusting his new tie, one I'd chosen, symbolizing how far we'd both come. No, I smiled, running my fingers over the silk. Just thinking about how different everything is now. Sarah appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand as always. The guest list is finalized. Every major player in global finance will be there, plus all 25 of our scholarship recipients. And the surprise announcement? Richard asked. Ready to? Go, she confirmed. The press is already speculating. I slipped into the emerald dress, the fabric familiar yet different, like putting on an old role but playing it with new purpose. Tonight wasn't about hiding power behind a perfect facade. It was about celebrating how that facade had cracked, open an entire industry. The Four Seasons ballroom was transformed, mixing traditional elegance with modern technology. Digital displays showed our company's journey alongside the wider changes we'd inspired. The old portraits of stern-faced banking patriarchs had been replaced by a diverse gallery of current industry leaders. Look who's here, Richard nodded, toward the entrance. William and Patricia Morrison had arrived, accompanied by their daughter Emma, now a rising star in digital finance. Behind them came Eleanor Walker with her investment group's executive board, all women who'd once been dismissed as mere corporate wives. Mrs. Chen Walker, a young voice called. I turned to find Lisa Chen, no relation, one of our first scholarship recipients. She'd just launched a successful AI-driven investment platform. I wanted you to meet my husband. He's my head of operations. Smiled at the role reversal, remembering all the times I'd been introduced as Richard's wife rather than by my own achievements. The young man beside her beamed with genuine pride in his wife's success. The times really have changed, Richard murmured as we watched more guests arrive. Former trophy wives now led major corporations. Their husbands had evolved into true partners rather than gatekeepers of power. Marcus appeared with the latest market reports. Our merged company's value had increased tenfold in 5 years, but more importantly, our model of transparent, inclusive leadership had become the industry standard. Ready for the announcement? Sarah asked as the room filled. I nodded, taking my place at the podium. The emerald dress caught the light, but now it felt less like armor and more like a victory banner. 5 years ago, I began. I stood in this room wearing this dress, playing the role of the perfect corporate wife while my husband called me his trophy. Tonight, I stand here as proof that sometimes the greatest revolutions start with a single moment of being underestimated. The room was silent, attentive. These weren't the same people who'd laughed at Richard's trophy wife comment 5 years ago. Or rather, they weren't the same people they had been. The merger we're celebrating tonight wasn't just about combining companies or modernizing finance. It was about transforming how power itself works, about proving that true strength lies not in maintaining old hierarchies, but in recognizing talent wherever it hides. I gestured to the digital displays, where images tracked the changes we'd inspired. Women leading major institutions. Corporate cultures evolving. The very definition of power shifting from control to collaboration. Tonight, I'm announcing the next phase of our revolution, the Global Innovation Fund for Hidden Talent, a $1 billion initiative to find and support overlooked innovators in every industry, in every corner of the world. The room erupted in applause. Sarah's tablet lit up with immediate press coverage. But I wasn't finished. And to lead this initiative, I'm proud to introduce our new Chief Transformation Officer, Richard Walker. Richard looked surprised, though we'd discussed this move for months. His journey from traditional power broker to champion of change made him perfect for identifying and nurturing hidden talent. Because true transformation, I continued, isn't just about changing who holds power, it's about changing how we think about power itself. Later, during the celebration, I found myself back at the exact spot where Richard had made his fateful trophy wife comment. But now I stood there as a symbol of transformation rather than decoration. You know what I realized? Richard said, joining me with champagne. That comment wasn't just about you. It was about me. About how small I was thinking. How threatened I felt by your potential. And now? Now I understand that real power isn't about making others smaller. It's about helping everyone reach their full potential. My phone buzzed with messages from around the world. Other hidden talents emerging, other revolutions beginning. The trophy wife revolution had evolved into something bigger than any one company or industry. To the next 5 years, Richard raised his glass. To all the quiet ones out there, I countered, just waiting for their moment to transform everything. The emerald dress caught the light one last time as we clinked glasses. Tomorrow it would return to the company museum, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful changes start with a single moment of being underestimated. And somewhere out there, another perfectly polished corporate wife was smiling quietly, gathering her strength, waiting for her own perfect moment to show everyone exactly what a trophy could do. 6 years after the merger, I found myself in Tokyo's financial district, standing before a room full of Japanese executives. The trophy wife revolution, as it had become known globally, had sparked similar movements across Asia's traditionally male-dominated business culture. "Tell us again," a senior banking executive's wife asked during the Q&A, "how you turned underestimation into advantage." I studied her carefully composed face, recognizing the familiar mask of quiet observation. Like so many others, she was gathering intelligence while being dismissed as mere decoration. "The power of being underestimated," I explained, "lies in the freedom it gives you to build strength unnoticed." Sarah, who had accompanied me on this international expansion tour, was monitoring real-time translations of social media reactions. "The Japanese hashtag for hidden CEO is trending," she reported quietly. My phone buzzed with a message from Richard, who was overseeing our Global Innovation Fund back in Boston. Eleanor's investment group just backed their first Japanese startup, founded by a former tea ceremony instructor of all things. The irony wasn't lost on me. Traditional female roles becoming launching pads for corporate revolution. It was happening everywhere we went. Mrs. Chen Walker, another woman, approached after the presentation, introducing herself as the wife of a major technology firm's CEO. "We've been studying your strategy. Many of us have projects of our own in development." I smiled, recognizing the careful way she understated her ambitions. "Projects that your husbands don't fully understand? They think we're just managing household investments," she confided. "But we've been building a network of female-led tech ventures, waiting for the right moment." Later, in my hotel suite overlooking Tokyo's glittering skyline, I reviewed reports from similar meetings across Asia. In Seoul, corporate wives were quietly acquiring controlling interests in family companies. In Singapore, traditional hostesses were revealing themselves as brilliant financial strategists. "The pattern is the same everywhere," Sarah noted, organizing the data. "Women using traditional roles as cover while building real power." My phone lit up with another message, this time from Patricia Morrison. She was in London, where the trophy wife revolution had taken an interesting twist, titled "Ladies Revealing." Themselves as tech innovators and venture capitalists. "Even the Queen was impressed," Patricia reported. Said it reminded her of how often royal women had shaped history while appearing to be merely decorative. Richard called as I was preparing for dinner with Japanese business leaders. "You've started something extraordinary," he said. "The Global Innovation Fund can barely keep up with all the hidden talent emerging." "Not started," I corrected him. "Just gave permission. These revolutions were already brewing everywhere. They just needed someone to show them it was possible." The dinner that evening was a masterclass in subtle power dynamics. Wives who had once been expected to simply pour tea and make pleasant conversation were now dropping hints about their own business ambitions. Their husbands, like Richard before them, were slowly realizing how much talent they had overlooked. "It's like watching dominoes fall in slow motion," Sarah observed as we left the restaurant. Each revelation inspiring 3 more women to step forward. Back in my suite, I received an unexpected video call from Eleanor Walker. "You'll never believe who just applied for funding," she began excitedly. "Remember that condescending banker's wife from your first charity committee? She's been secretly developing a revolutionary financial AI platform." I laughed, thinking of all the society women who had once judged me for focusing on business instead of social duties. Now they were leading their own corporate transformations. "The best revolutions," I told Sarah as we prepared for the next day's meetings, "are the ones that look like evolution from the outside." Until suddenly, everything has changed. My phone buzzed with messages from around the world, women in every country sharing stories of hidden ambition and careful preparation. The trophy wife revolution had become a global phenomenon, transcending culture and tradition. Looking out at Tokyo's night sky, I thought about all the quiet revolutionaries out there, watching and waiting. Each one gathering strength behind a perfect mask of conformity, preparing for their own moment of transformation. "You know what the real legacy of this movement is?" I asked Sarah. "What's that?" Now, whenever someone calls a woman a trophy wife, everyone in the room wonders what kind of revolution she's planning. The lights of Tokyo sparkled like stars, each one perhaps marking another hidden CEO preparing to emerge. The revolution that had started with a thoughtless comment at a Boston promotion party had become a global awakening. And somewhere out there, in every city and culture, another perfectly polished corporate wife was smiling quietly, gathering her strength, waiting for her perfect moment to transform everything. 7 years after the merger, I stood in the newly constructed Chen Walker School of Business at Harvard University. The building itself was a statement, all glass and light, designed by a former corporate wife who had revealed herself as a brilliant architect. "The first class is ready," Sarah announced, tablet displaying profiles of our inaugural students. We had specifically sought out those who had been overlooked by traditional business education. Not just women, but anyone who had been underestimated. "Remember when business schools taught that power was about dominance?" Richard mused, reviewing the revolutionary curriculum we'd developed. "Now they're teaching the strategic advantages of being underestimated." The lecture hall filled with students eager to learn the lessons of the trophy wife revolution. Among them sat corporate wives from around the world, sent by their husbands, to learn about managing household investments, while actually preparing for their own business transformations. "Today's lesson," I began, "is about the power of patient observation. About how being dismissed as decorative can give you the perfect cover to study systems from the inside." Eleanor Walker had joined us for this special session. My former mother-in-law, once the perfect corporate wife herself, now ran one of the most successful women-focused investment funds in the world. "Tell them about the charity committees," she suggested with a knowing smile. "About how we use social gatherings to build our networks while the men thought we were just planning parties." The students leaned forward, many of them recognizing their own current situations in our stories. I saw the same careful attention, the same hidden ambition I'd once disguised behind a trophy wife's smile. "Mrs. Chen Walker," one student raised her hand. "My husband thinks I'm just taking business classes to better understand his work. Should I tell him about my startup plans?" "What did I do?" I asked the class. Several students smiled, understanding. "You waited," they answered in unison. "Built your strength in secret. Chose the perfect moment to reveal your power." My phone buzzed with updates from Marcus about our latest global initiatives. The merged Morrison and Blake had become more than just a financial institution. It was now a launching pad for hidden talent everywhere. "The key," I continued, "is understanding that being underestimated isn't a weakness. It's an opportunity. Every dismissive comment, every patronizing pat on the head, is actually giving you more time to build your foundation." Sarah displayed statistics showing how many corporate wives had emerged as business leaders since our revolution began. The numbers were staggering, hundreds of hidden CEOs revealing themselves, thousands more preparing for their moment. But it's not just about taking power, Richard added, sharing his own journey from patronizing husband to true partner. It's about transforming how power itself works. During the break, I met with individual students, each one carrying their own carefully hidden ambitions. A CEO's wife developing a blockchain platform, a trophy girlfriend quietly acquiring tech patents, a society hostess building an AI empire. "You've created a new kind of business education," Eleanor observed as we watched the students network, teaching not just business skills but revolutionary strategy. "The Old Boys Club had their secret handshakes," I agreed. "We're teaching something more powerful, the art of invisible strength." Patricia Morrison arrived for the afternoon session, bringing news from her global women's business network. "The revolution has reached Saudi Arabia," she reported excitedly. "Women there are using traditional restrictions as cover while building digital enterprises." My phone lit up with messages from our graduates around the world, each one sharing stories of transformation, of power claimed and systems changed. The trophy wife revolution had evolved into a complete reimagining of how influence could work. "You know what the most powerful moment in any revolution is?" I asked the reassembled class. "When you reveal your true strength," a student suggested. "No," I smiled. "It's right now, when someone who's been dismissed is sitting quietly, gathering knowledge, preparing to change everything, like all of you are doing." The afternoon sun streamed through the building's glass walls, illuminating faces bright with hidden purpose. These weren't just students. They were revolutionary cells, preparing to transform their own corners of the world. "Remember," I concluded, "every time someone underestimates you, they're actually giving you a gift. The gift of being overlooked while you build something extraordinary." As the class ended, I watched the students disperse, each carrying seeds of revolution back to their own communities. The trophy wife era was ending not with a bang, but with thousands of quiet revelations. And somewhere in that lecture hall, another perfectly polished corporate wife was taking careful notes, hiding her brilliant plans behind a practiced smile, waiting for her own perfect moment to transform everything. 8 years to the day after Richard's promotion party, I stood in the United Nations General Assembly, preparing to address a special session on global economic transformation. The trophy wife revolution had evolved far beyond our original corporate takeover, becoming a worldwide movement for hidden talent and overlooked potential. "The numbers are extraordinary," Sarah reported, reviewing the global impact data. Over 10,000 former trophy wives now leading major companies, countless others emerging every day. Richard sat in the diplomatic section, no longer the man who had once thoughtlessly dismissed his wife's achievements. As head of our Global Innovation Fund, he had helped identify and support hidden talent across every continent. "Ready?" Eleanor Walker asked, joining me at the podium. She would introduce me, a fitting symbol of how completely relationships and power structures had transformed. The assembly hall filled with representatives from every nation, but my attention was drawn to the special gallery. There sat corporate wives from around the world, each one carrying her own carefully concealed ambitions. They had come not just to listen, but to recognize their own potential for revolution. 8 years ago, Eleanor began her introduction, my son made the mistake of calling his wife a trophy. Today, that trophy has reshaped global finance and inspired a movement that transcends culture and tradition. I stepped to the podium, remembering that emerald dress and that fateful party. "The true power of being underestimated," I began, "lies not in proving others wrong, but in transforming how power itself works." 8 years to the day after Richard's promotion party, I stood in the United Nations General Assembly, preparing to address a special session on global economic transformation. The trophy wife revolution had evolved far beyond our original corporate takeover, becoming a worldwide movement for hidden talent and overlooked potential. "The numbers are extraordinary," Sarah reported, reviewing the global impact data. Over 10,000 former trophy wives now leading major companies, countless others emerging every day. Richard sat in the diplomatic section, no longer the man who had once thoughtlessly dismissed his wife's achievements. As head of our Global Innovation Fund, he had helped identify and support hidden talent across every continent. "Ready?" Eleanor Walker asked, joining me at the podium. She would introduce me, a fitting symbol of how completely relationships and power structures had transformed. The assembly hall filled with representatives from every nation, but my attention was drawn to the special gallery. There sat corporate wives from around the world, each one carrying her own carefully concealed ambitions. They had come not just to listen, but to recognize their own potential for revolution. 8 years ago, Eleanor began her introduction, my son made the mistake of calling his wife a trophy. Today, that trophy has reshaped global finance and inspired a movement that transcends culture and tradition. I stepped to the podium, remembering that emerald dress and that fateful party. The true power of being underestimated, I began, lies not in proving others wrong, but in transforming how power itself works. 10 years to the day after Richard's promotion party, I stood once again in front of the mirror in our Beacon Hill home, holding the emerald dress that had started it all. Tonight was the 10th anniversary celebration of the merger, but more than that, it was a celebration of the global transformation it had sparked. "Hard to believe this all started with that dress," Richard said, appearing in the doorway. A decade had softened his features but sharpened his understanding. He was no longer the man who had thoughtlessly dismissed his wife's achievements. "It started long before the dress," I corrected him, running my fingers over the silk. "This was just the moment I stopped hiding," Sarah burst in, tablet in hand as always. "You need to see this. The Financial Times just released their Decade in Review special edition. The Trophy Wife Revolution, How One Comment Transformed Global Business." I smiled, remembering that night 10 years ago. The perfect corporate wife smile, hiding plans that would reshape the financial world. How many hidden CEOs have emerged since then? Over 20,000 confirmed, Sarah reported, with more revealing themselves every day. The latest was a British duchess who's been secretly developing quantum computing technology. The Four Seasons Ballroom had been transformed for tonight's celebration. Digital displays showed the journey of our revolution, from corporate takeover to global movement. The guest list included corporate wives turned CEOs from every continent, each with their own story of transformation. Mrs. Chen Walker, a young woman, approached as we arrived. She was wearing an emerald dress remarkably similar to my historic one. "I'm wearing this in your honor. 10 years ago, I was serving drinks at that promotion party. Tonight, I'm here as the CEO of my own tech company." Eleanor Walker arrived with her investment group's executive board, all former corporate wives who had revealed themselves as brilliant strategists. "The next generation won't have to hide," she declared, hugging me warmly. "That's your real legacy." William Morrison, now in his 80s but still sharp, made his way to our group. "I was such a fool," he said, not for the first time. "We all were. Think of all the talent we wasted, seeing only what we expected to see." The evening unfolded like a living history of our revolution. Patricia Morrison, now a leading advocate for women in tech, shared stories of how social networks had become launching pads for business empires. Former trophy wives demonstrated the digital platforms and AI systems they'd developed while being dismissed as decorative. "The most powerful moment in any revolution," I told the gathered crowd during my speech, "isn't the moment of triumph. It's the quiet moment before, when someone who's been underestimated decides to stop hiding their strength." Richard joined me at the podium, our journey from traditional power couple to true partners symbolizing the broader transformations we'd inspired. 10 years ago, I thought calling my wife a trophy was a compliment, he admitted. I never realized she would use that trophy to shatter every ceiling in sight. My phone buzzed with messages from around the world, watch parties in every time zone, celebrating their own local revolutions. The movement had grown far beyond our original corporate takeover, becoming a global reimagining of power itself. Later, as the celebration continued around us, I found myself back at the exact spot where Richard had made his fateful comment. The emerald dress caught the light, but now it felt like a symbol of transformation rather than concealment. "You know what the best part is?" Sarah asked, showing me the latest social media trends. Now, when someone calls a woman a trophy wife, everyone in the room wonders what kind of revolution she's planning. I looked out over the crowd, seeing not just our past victories, but the future transformations still to come. Every perfectly polished corporate wife might be carrying her own revolutionary plans, every dismissive comment becoming fuel for the next big change. To the next decade, Richard raised his glass. To all the hidden revolutionaries, I countered, thinking of every woman out there still waiting for her moment. May they all find their perfect time to shine. The night drew to a close, but the revolution we'd started showed no signs of ending. Somewhere out there, another corporate wife was sitting quietly at another business dinner, smiling serenely while making plans to change everything. Because that's the true power of being underestimated. The freedom it gives you to build something extraordinary while the world sees only what it expects to see. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is just waiting for the perfect moment to roar. As we left the ballroom, I took one last look at the place where our revolution had begun. The emerald dress would return to the museum tomorrow, but its work was far from done. For every trophy wife who had revealed her power, there were countless others still gathering their strength, preparing for their own moments of transformation. Durai. Revolution hadn't ended. It had only grown stronger, quieter, more strategic. And somewhere out there, another perfectly polished corporate wife was smiling her perfect smile, knowing that her time was coming. Because sometimes the most powerful revolution is the one nobody sees coming until suddenly everything has changed.